This episode, as with all episodes, exists thanks to the supporters of the show who contribute a mere $3 per month via patreon.com/Copytraders Club. You can too. It takes 2 minutes to sign up and you probably won't feel it. What you will feel is a warm, fuzzy feeling of helping out a little independent podcaster who creates a show you enjoy and get value from. Patreon.com/Copytraders Club. Thanks for listening and thanks for your support. Copytraders Club, where you can learn how to make better decisions and more money copy trading. I'm Gavin Macaulay, my name and username on eToro. Links to everything, including Discord and Facebook groups, are in the link tree in the show notes. Today we're going to talk to a fellow copier as we seek to benefit from his many decades of life experience. Here we go. Episode 17 of Copytraders Club, and in this episode we talk to David Murphy, a copy trader not in his 20s, 30s, or even really old like someone in their 40s. David is indeed in his 70s and has therefore a very unique perspective on all things eToro. We ensured the limousine we sent would play the music of Vera Lynn and be well stocked with Werther's originals. But quelle surprise! He is dancing up the stone steps of the clubhouse like a twinkle-toed teenager. David, hello. Bienvenue. Bienvenido. Benvenuto. Welcome to Copytraders Club.
Grazie. Grazie mille. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you, and you're a big-time listener of the show. I don't need to tell you what's next.
Quickfire questions.
In order to get through security and into the VIP lounge. I assume you're ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Username on eToro.
Purplesage.
Date you joined eToro.
September 2020.
Year of birth.
1951.
Place of residence.
Italy.
Profession.
Semi-retired freelance translator.
Briefly state what you aim to achieve on eToro.
I aim to supplement my income and at the same time have some fun.
Name one of your investing heroes.
No investing hero, but two inspirations, Mark Farber and Jim Rogers.
Name one of your favorite investing books.
No investment book as such, but one book which is undoubtedly very useful for any investor, The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
That completes the formalities. Let's proceed into our VIP section here at the clubhouse. The magnificent Copytraders Lounge awaits you. David Murphy, aka Purplesage, are you ready for this magical transition?
Yes, I am. Let's go for it.
Okay, so David Murphy, long-time listener of the show. Here you are in the inner sanctum. Can you believe it?
Yes, I am really very happy to be here, Gavin. It's beyond my wildest expectations.
You need wilder expectations, I suspect.
I do, yeah.
Okay, so you are a copy trader, obviously, not a PI, and we're here to talk about all your experiences on eToro and beyond. So let's get to know you a little bit, set the scene. You say you're a translator, and that explains my multiple welcomes.
Mm-hmm.
How's my Romance language pronunciation?
You sounds pretty good, in fact. Very good, in fact.
Your main languages are?
Italian, French, and Spanish, always into English, obviously, because English is my mother tongue. Although in recent years, I've only been working from Italian into English.
Was Italian the first language you learnt outside of English?
No, the first language I learned was French. And I lived in France for many years. And I learned Italian when I was probably around 33, 34. But if you speak one Romance language, it's much easier learning the next one, especially French and Spanish, which have similar grammatical things. And I found it a fairly easy transition. A lot of it depends on motivation as well. And I was very happy to learn Italian. Spanish, I speak a little bit less well because I spent a few years in Spain. I lived in Barcelona, where most of the people I knew spoke Catalan, and I wanted to learn Spanish first, but they would have much preferred me to learn Catalan first. But I can still speak reasonable Spanish.
And as the bat-eared listener may have picked up, your year of birth is considerably longer ago than most. Now, I'm always going on about how old I am compared to eToro users.
Mm-hmm.
But I ain't got nothing on you, Grandad.
No, you ain't. No.
So what advice do you have for me, and indeed the listener, about coping with the aging process?
Well, I think the only thing to do is to live from day to day and enjoy life as much as you can and try and stay healthy physically and mentally. And there's two basic concepts. One is lifespan and the other is health span. And just keep going until you get to the end of your health span. And when that happens, I mean, fair enough. I mean, we're all going to go one day, but plenty of physical exercise, plenty of fruit and vegetables, the odd glass of red wine, but not too much. And your genes obviously count as well. Don't drive a car if you can avoid that. Very stressful.
Okay, great. I was just going to let you go there until you ran out of ideas.
Well, I could have gone on forever, but, well, not quite forever, but...
None of us can go on forever.
No, none. We wouldn't want to either.
That's funny you should say that. I was just out with a guy who I know who's on the way out, basically, quite soon. He's an older fella. And he was saying he's lived all the life he wants to live, really. And he was asking me, would I take a deal that guaranteed I made it in relatively good health to 75, which is about the age he is. And, you know, it's tempting to take that deal just because it means you are going to avoid tragedy. It'd be much more of a tragedy if I was hit by a bus tomorrow with a young son and everything. But yes, anyway, it's not a very light and fluffy start to the chat. So let's keep it moving, shall we?
Yeah, let me just tell you one more thing, which I forgot to mention. Being semi-retired, I mean, I told you I'm semi-retired, but I've been semi-retired pretty much all my life. And I think that's, for me, is part of the secret of aging well. And it also means that I have no particular desire to stop working either, but I've had plenty of time doing other things as well. So not working myself to the bone, which is very difficult to do sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, stress is a major contributor to ill health and short lifespans.
Sure.
So, how did you come across eToro?
I came across eToro around 2010 when I was living in Thailand, and I was looking around to do some kind of investment. I was thinking about Forex trading because in Thailand, I'd met quite a few people who were living there, who were working as Forex traders. I thought, well, maybe I could do the same thing. So I looked on the internet and came across eToro. At that time, there was no copy trading. But for me, one of the problems with Forex trading was that these people they were getting up in the middle of the night and they were having to adapt to the various hours of the different markets. And they were doing a lot of studying. And I realized that I really didn't want to do that. And I just kept putting it off. But eToro was always around on my computer and I was looking at it. And it seemed to be much more user friendly than the other things I was looking at, the other investment platforms. So one day, much later on, I decided to open an account and get a virtual account. This must have been, 2020, so a long time. And then I realized that copy trading, and that seemed to suit me perfectly because not wanting to spend too much time studying investment. And I got started with a virtual account, and that's it. I also did a bit of research about how to find the right people to copy as well.
Yes, at its very most basic, the concept is absolute genius.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of absolute genius, how did you come across Copytraders Club?
That, to be quite honest, I cannot exactly remember, but it must have been looking at a feed somewhere. And the thing that jumped out at me was that it was a podcast, because I very much like podcasts, which I would see as an extension of radio. I've always preferred radio to television. And all my long life as an expat, I've listened to the radio, which I used to listen to on crackly shortwave. And when podcasts came along, I was very happy because you can get radio programs, but you can get all kinds of other things as well. And when I started listening to it, enjoyed it very much and started at the bottom and listened through until I got to the episode where you were at that particular time, and have not looked back since.
And there was one particular episode which inspired you to get in touch.
Yes, there was. I mean, probably normally I would not have got in touch with you otherwise. I think it was back in February. You were talking to, I think, Nikos, and you, for some reason, you were talking about the age of copy traders. And you said, quite rightly, I think, that probably most copy traders are quite young. And then you started talking about the higher age ranges. And I think there was also some mention of risk appetite, that the older you got, the lower your risk appetite might be. And at some point, don't quote, I don't think I'm quoting exactly, but you said, can you imagine a septuagenarian copy trader? And there was nothing derogatory about what you was pejorative about what you were saying. It was just the very idea seemed inconceivable. And I thought, wait a minute, I am a septuagenarian copy trader, so I can't just let that go. So I got in touch with you, and you kindly invited me to come on the podcast. But I do believe that I'm not the only one, and that there must be quite a few older people there, part of my generation, because my generation now have time. A lot of them have lots of cash, because baby boomers are probably the most privileged generation in history, if we're talking about the Western world anyway. I mean, we were born into the post-war austerity, and then came the 60s and people bought property, and it's been a very wealthy generation, obviously generalizing. I mean, there are exceptions to that. I mean, younger people now have it much harder than we did back then. And they also missed the 60s, which is something quite special for anybody who lived through it, I think.
Well, I'm torn between wanting to go to a question that I'm ready to ask you about what platform you listen on, and asking you about living in the 60s. Can we do both of those in reverse order? Were the 60s as amazing as everybody says?
Well, I mean, yes, I think so. I mean, we had a good life. I mean, there was hippies. There were hippies everywhere, and I was basically a hippie. Probably still am, although I probably don't look like one now. And things were easy. Jobs were easy to find in terms of education. Not only did you not have to pay for university, but you got a grant for going there. And there was something vibrant. There was the music. It was a kind of a cultural blossoming, which quickly faded, I think, moving into the 70s. Things began to change a bit.
Were you like driving around the country in a VW camper van, experiencing free love left, right, and center?
No, I told you a little bit earlier that it's not a good idea to drive. And I've never driven a car in my life, okay? I used to hitchhike, something which unfortunately has disappeared. And I had the desire to travel. I used to hitchhike around the UK, but also this was in the early 70s. I set off with a girlfriend to hitchhike around the Mediterranean. We went across North Africa and then to Greece and back to Britain. Set off with a couple of £100 each and came back 3 months later. I mean, at this time, going to the Mediterranean is banal because everybody does it by plane. But that was the big adventure in those days. And yeah, the age of free love and drugs. I mean, it's a cliche, but it was there, and many people experienced that to one extent or another. I mean, the pill got invented. Philip Larkin was too late. I mean, because sex, as far as he was concerned, started in 1963, and he was too old to enjoy it. I was 16 in 1967, the summer of love, so just about old enough to start enjoying it.
Even if Larkin had have timed it correctly, he would have still been on the outside looking in, like the dancing class.
Probably, yes. He would have probably a bit of a misanthrope, perhaps.
Okay, so the other question was, going back to what you said earlier, you're a big fan of podcasts. On what platform do you listen to Copytraders Club?
It's something called Overcast. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. I think it's only for Apple computers.
Well, I've heard of it because I know I've submitted to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't appear on Overcast.
Ah, okay. Yeah. And the reason I use it is because it's user-friendly, because I'm not a very practical person. And anything that's user-friendly for me is a plus.
And do you listen when doing mundane activities?
No, I tend to listen in bed, which could be the middle of the afternoon. It could be in the evening. I usually go to bed early and can often fall asleep listening to a podcast, which is a pain because that means early in the morning I have to start listening. I have to listen back again, right? But I must admit that Copytraders Club is such compelling material that I usually manage to stay awake until the end. Okay. Also, it's conveniently paused, so I can switch off and then resume again at 5 a.m., which is when I wake up, right?
It's nice to know that I keep you up when you're in bed.
You do. Yeah. Other things keep me up as well. My prostate keeps me up as well, but that's another matter. Maybe we shouldn't go into that.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear you don't listen on YouTube, because I'm a podcast purist myself, and I think podcasts an audio medium and should be treated as such, and it's such a better experience to listen using a podcast app. You know, because if you're on YouTube, even if you're on your phone, you can't turn your screen off. Otherwise, the sound cuts out. It's altogether not as pleasant.
Yeah, as I said, for me, it replicates the radio experience, but with good audio quality, which listening to things over shortwave for many years, I didn't have. So, but podcasts are expanding. I mean, it's a very vibrant medium, I would think.
Yeah, I might be transitioning the YouTube channel away from a place to host the podcast and simply as a channel to support it on the audio platforms. One of the reasons for this is that if the Patreon page does not generate sufficient cash to keep the podcast going, I may have to include annoying adverts, and they will only run on the audio platforms. So, the listener may want to support the show via patreon.com/copytradersclub, which could keep it ad-free. And also the listener might want to consider transitioning away from listening on YouTube to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. It's in your phone. It gets downloaded automatically. It's always with you. It just makes life easier, I think.
Well, when I use Overcast, I've never paid for the ad-free version, right? But there are just little banner ads at the bottom which don't bother me, if you see what I mean. I don't know whether they generate enough income.
Well, it'll be ads like during the show, audio ads.
Ah, right. Okay. Yeah.
Let's have a question from the Art of People, David. Can you pick a number between 1 and 10?
Yes, I know you've had a long run of 7s, Gavin, so I'll give you a break on that. I'll go for 4.
You're an Uber listener. This is great. Number 4. What's the most exciting thing in your professional life right now?
The Sustainable Development Goals.
Explain, please.
The Sustainable Development Goals are the UN goals for 2030, which replaced the Millennial Goals for 2015. And there are various goals which need to be reached if we're to survive. I mean, the quality of water, the quality of cities. And I do a lot of work about that, okay? A lot of translations connected with the Sustainable Development Goals.
Oh, I see. I was trying to work out what's the connection with your job.
I mean, there's an organization called the Italian Alliance for Sustainable Development, and they talk about what's being done to meet these goals, first of all, at a global level, then at a European level, and then at the level of Italy. Okay. And I translate this pretty much every year. And that was in my mind at this particular point.
Okay, so we're going to get into a bit more of the eToro side of things in a second. Just as a little prelude to that, I have a couple of questions here, I think, which might help us set the scene. One of the questions is this: what has been your relationship to money down all the years? And secondly, you told me previously that you have some ethical concerns about investing.
Money has never been anything very important for me in my life. Most of the time, I didn't think about saving or investment. But having said that, I've always been careful with money. I've always been a minimalist and have always given more importance to experiences rather than owning things. And sometimes taking that to quite extreme lengths, in fact. I didn't buy property until just a few years ago. I swallow dived onto the property ladder at the age of 65. Okay. And there were a few exceptions. In the early 70s, I had a friend who was investing. And at that time, it was a complicated process. You had to go and see a stockbroker. And he was using something called Chartism. And his idea was to make enough money so he could retire. And he tried to dissuade me from doing it. But I went off and I bought shares in British Leyland and a construction company called Orme Development, something like that. I kept these shares for a while and lost money and also lost interest. So most of my life, I just didn't even think about it. I used to put my money at certain points into term deposits, which meant that you got a better interest rate. Back in the 90s, when I was in Italy, my bank got in touch with me and said, "You've got all this money sitting in a savings account. Why don't you do something with it?" And I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. They were obviously motivated as well. And I wanted to do ethical investment, to get some ethical funds. And they said, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. You won't make as much money as you would if you had ordinary funds." But I insisted. And in fact, I did make money. And that was up until the 2008 crash. But as I got older, I began to think, well, just leaving money around is not a good idea as you get older. So I did start putting money again later on into mutual funds with my bank, which have done reasonably well in the last few years, although obviously not in the last few months. And one question I sometimes ask myself is whether I want to transfer this money to eToro. I don't know about that. Part of me thinks that, I don't know, I think it's completely rational, but somehow as if the money is safer in a bank than in eToro, but probably not. I mean, there's probably no difference. Part of it is because when you live in the European Union, eToro is based in Cyprus, which I always associate with Russian oligarchs and things like that. Probably no connection. I mean, it's probably author. And this, I might take this step at some point. But as for ethical concerns, I mean, the same kind of ethical concerns as I would have in life. I mean, where do you draw the line? Obviously, most of us don't want to invest in weapons and tobacco and things like that. But how about Coca-Cola? I mean, Coca-Cola, you're investing in type 2 diabetes and obesity. I mean, should that prevent you from investing in Coca-Cola? How about crypto, which I find very, very interesting as a concept? In fact, one of my PIs is quite heavily into crypto. But what about the mining? Given the current crisis we're living in with climate change, I mean, should we be frittering away energy on crypto mining? Is there not another way to do that? I mean, the guest you had on last week, Kieran, he might be able to come up with a solution using quantum computing, I don't know, which would use less energy. I mean, the amount of energy is massive as far as I understand. I mean, a few months ago in Kazakhstan was, because a lot of the crypto miners, if I understand correctly, moved out of China into Kazakhstan and blew some of the power stations. I don't know. So I do have these ethical concerns. And when you're copy trading, you can go through and you can actually eliminate copies. But I'm beginning to think that maybe I would like to shift my copy trading at some point and to move towards more ethical investment. But having said that, it's one thing I find difficult on eToro is their search function. I mean, if I put, for example, ethical PIs into their search function, nothing will come up. I mean, probably if I put Sharpe ratio or something like that, something would come up. It's a question. I have no idea how many PIs are there.
I don't know the answer to that.
But many thousands, right?
Yeah, thousands, I'm sure. The one point I was going to say is that I think as a platform, it's much easier to exercise some sort of ethical control over your investments on eToro than it would be in your mutual funds, because there's a long list of mutual funds, unit trusts, and each of those invest in hundreds of different things. And if you drill down into ultimately what your holdings are, you'll see that there's tons of things you're invested in your mutual funds that you wouldn't choose to be. Whereas eToro it's much easier. I think it's a smaller pool of investments, so it's easier to keep your eye on what your money's being put behind.
It's a lot less opaque, right? Because if I go along to my mutual fund, very difficult for me to get that information.
Yes.
Whereas, as you say, with eToro, I can see exactly what I'm investing in.
You may have heard me on previous episodes talking about how it's a good idea to commit to writing your copy trading manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done such a thing?
No, I haven't, and I wouldn't consider doing that. It's part of the way that I learn things. I tend to do things in a kind of an organic way, bottom up, if you see what I mean. So I start with something, and either it goes somewhere or it doesn't. And it's not that I never write anything down. In fact, I spend my whole working day writing things down, but I don't see the personal need to do that for copy trading. I mean, I can see the point that the idea of it clarifies your ideas. To give you an example, I mean, when I chose the PIs that I have right now, there were two things that I was interested in. One was renewable energy, and another one was China. But since then, things have changed, particularly as far as China is concerned, and the regulators have cracked down. So, in other words, I'm in my mind, the thing is going on all the time. So I'm just following it through as it grows, if you see what I mean. And if my interest is not there, then something will. It's a constantly changing. It's a flux. That's the way I see it. I don't see personally the need for a manifesto.
No, it's not necessary for everyone. I think it's most important for those who want to sort of preempt their emotions for when things go wrong, so that when things do go wrong, they can look and see the words that they put down when their mind was calmer and more rational, and they told themselves to follow these guidelines.
I have Marcus Aurelius to help me with that.
Well, you heard it first here, kids. Marcus Aurelius is your chosen reading material after this episode. Okay, so there's a couple of little points that we've already mentioned. Let's tie them together when I ask, what do you think your appetite for risk is with your eToro portfolio? And is that in keeping with what they usually say about an investor in their 70s?
I think my risk appetite is probably medium to high. I mean, I certainly won't be buying Lunar or things like that. Okay. But also, I believe that someone of my age, I mean, we're obviously talking about money which you're investing, which you don't need to live. Okay. It's an extra. We have far fewer years left than the average person. And when I often hear about you should be in it for the long term, I understand what's going on. Okay, I understand the logic of that. But the further you get into your 70s, I mean, it begins to ring a bit hollow, the long term, if you see what I mean. And I don't, certainly in the recent, I don't know, crash is maybe rather a strong word, but I mean, what's happened to the markets in the last few months, I've not done any panic selling. I mean, I'm not worried about that. So I would say that my risk appetite is fairly high.
Well, I would say, for the benefit of the listener who can't see you, you're a very sprightly gentleman in his 70s, and you may have a longer term than they might think.
Well, you see, we never know. You see, we should, as the Buddhists say, I mean, we should prepare ourselves to die any day, right? I mean, living each day as it comes. But yeah, and also where I live, I mean, people tend to live a long time. So I can maybe take my example from them. I don't know. Glass of Cananao with your dinner is probably quite useful for that.
Okay, so when you started on eToro, did you go straight into copying?
No, the first thing I played around with was the virtual account. In fact, I played around with that for quite a long time, for about 3 months. And it was very, very useful because I learned a lot doing that. And I did a little bit of research about how to choose PIs, not on the eToro site. Okay, I looked at a couple of YouTube videos, and people said use the filters, and I put in the various available parameters, and I didn't really seem to come up with anything that made too much sense to me. And then I started looking at Editor's Choice, and that seemed, there's the photo, there's a little potted biography, you've got the percentage they've made in the last year. So I started flicking through that. The first couple of people I became interested in one was called One Girl, and another one called Logic Fool, who I think that one of the podcasts was an interview with him. And I started looking at their feeds to see, to find out a bit more about them, which is the same process I've used subsequently with other PIs. But I didn't actually go ahead with either of them. And still always using Editor's Choice, I chose, first of all, Return Invest, who's from Slovenia. He was the first person I copied, and I don't regret copying him. I mean, I don't think he has the same kind of financial background as many other PIs do, but he's certainly very conscientious. He's definitely a bit of a geek, I think. I'm looking for people who have expertise that I do not have, right? And I don't have either the time or the inclination to acquire. And then I also with Editor's Choice, I came across Eloise, who is obviously attractive because she uses machine learning, she uses algorithms, and she also has financial knowledge, and she writes good posts on her feed, and I've been happy with her. I also, soon after that, I had a PI, his name was Jan Swang from Malaysia, and he is an actuary with a lot of financial background. And I was happy copying him, but he was quite heavily invested in China. So at some point, I closed the copy, not because I was particularly unhappy with it. In fact, I made a profit changing it. For me, there's always a temptation. I also keep the watch list, just like I'm sure everybody else does. And I follow the watch list. And when I see somebody new, I'm tempted to add this person immediately. But this means going against the conventional wisdom of only having 4 or 5 PIs. But I'm beginning to question that. I'm beginning to wonder whether maybe in my case, I could have a few more.
Yeah, I'm not sure to what extent 4 or 5 is the conventional wisdom. It's kind of the number I might say, in fact. But I've asked this question to so many PIs, and I think the average answer is, between 4 and 10, maybe. Anywhere in that kind of range.
Yeah, but without adding them wholesale, if you see what I mean. So I'm thinking about maybe adding a few more PIs in the near future, and also moving towards, if possible, more diversification, because I've also realized that probably the PIs I'm copying, there's probably a similarity in many ways. There are differences. Maybe I would like to find a PI who does currency trading, or a PI who just does ETFs. See, another thing is I realize that I've sometimes thought about investing in ETFs, but there are hundreds of ETFs, maybe thousands, and I would have to do a lot of research if I was doing it by myself. There are some people who specialize in ETFs. Another thing is bond trading. I mean, something I don't know a great deal about, but I'm sure there are possibilities there.
So you mentioned Jan Swang and that you stopped copying him, but I don't think you really fleshed out why you stopped copying him.
I think I probably was brainwashed by the idea that I shouldn't have too many PIs, and maybe just to kind of do a little bit of cleaning up and get rid of one. Because then I started going for a few more PIs. Another one I saw on Editor's Choice was Hugo Manonti, who you've also interviewed. And once again, I was attracted by his professional background. And I also like the way he doesn't report very often on his feed, but when he does, it's interesting. It's succinct and to the point. So I wanted to open the renewables portfolio. I just thought maybe I'm getting too many things, and I thought it doesn't do me any harm to stop a copy. I mean, I don't necessarily feel any specific fidelity to someone, if you see what I mean.
Okay, let me at this point then paint a picture for the listener of what your portfolio looks like, as you've already mentioned several of the dramatis personae. So you have 5 popular investors and 1, not going to say copy portfolio. What are we supposed to say now?
Smart portfolio, I think they're called.
So your PIs are Return Invest, Mate Krajnik, Ruby MZA, Eloise Grief, Hugo Manonti, 95, otherwise known as Hugo Manenti, Bees 84, Steve Budgeon, and CPH Equities, which is a guy called Christian, whose name appears as Blue Screen Media. And he's a black star, so I'm sure everyone's familiar with him. And then the smart portfolio is renewable energy, future of power. That's what you just began talking about.
Right.
So you're happy with your lineup currently? Might you add other smart portfolios in the future, or how has your experience been of this?
Unfortunately, when I got the smart portfolio with renewables, it had been doing very well up to the point when I got it. And since then, it hasn't done very well.
I believe that's known as Murphy's Law.
Yes, which I've been cursed by all my life. I mean, coupled with being left-handed, I mean, it's a double whammy, right?
Very sinister.
Yes, undoubtedly, yeah. But I still believe that renewable energy, I mean, if renewable energy doesn't go somewhere, then none of us are going to go anywhere. So I'm patient. What I haven't fully understood is to what extent the smart portfolios are managed. I mean, when you have a PI, you can see it being managed all the time. You can see it on the newsfeed. The smart portfolio, they do have a newsfeed and they do update every now and again, but I think they reshuffle it once a year.
Yes, I think they're all different, but many of them are annual rebalancing.
Yeah. So I'm not particularly keen on the idea of moving into other smart portfolios at this point in time. It's more a question of choosing another couple of PIs.
Just as a side note, how far do we have to go back in your history to come across a Murphy that comes from the old country?
We have to go back further than I thought until a couple of years ago. I've been convinced all my life that I had an Irish grandfather, okay, who came from County Cork. And because of this Brexit nonsense, I wanted to get another passport, okay? And when you have an Irish grandfather, you can apply for an Irish passport. I mean, I would have applied for an Italian passport, but it takes 8 years, and I might not even be around in 8 years' time. So I thought, go for an Irish one. I looked on the website, and it was very simple and straightforward. The problem was to trace my grandfather. So I contacted my cousin, okay, and I said, you know that we have an Irish grandfather. Do you have any information? Do you have anything like a birth certificate? I know he came from a small village called Killer, which is just east of Cork, I believe. And she did a bit of research and she managed to dig a birth certificate out of a bottom drawer. And lo and behold, he was born in Fulham in London. In other words, it was a tall story that he'd obviously been telling and had been transferred through all these decades. So we're talking about, I imagine my Irish ancestry goes back to the potato famine. So we're talking about probably the the 1850s, 1860s. You'll know better than I do the exact dates for that. And presumably my grandfather was extrapolating what his father had done. But my name is David Patrick Murphy, okay? And I've always been proud of this bogus heritage.
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Copytraders Club.
Copytraders Club.
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Do you copy?
Copytraders Club.
Copytraders Club.
David, do you copy open trades or not?
Yes, I do. I copy whatever my PI suggests that I do, which is usually open trades. Okay, I understand that for certain kinds of investment, it's not a good idea, but it seems to me that this information is freely provided by your PI, right? So I do copy open trades. Yeah.
Do you set a copy stop loss, or where do you set it at?
Okay, I set it for the minimum, which is 5%, I believe, because I believe that if I'm copying a PI, then who I trust, then inadvertently setting off a stop loss would be a pain. Obviously, if I was doing something by myself and leveraging this kind of thing, I would obviously set a much higher stop loss. So I trust my PIs in that sense. Okay.
Yeah, I think that copy stop losses being hit all over the place at the moment, often to people who are unawares until they check in next time they log in. And they'll be like, oh, I've stopped copying that guy.
Yeah.
And locked in the loss. Would you ever close individual trades? And if so, under what circumstances?
For ethical reasons. I mean, I might do that, okay? But normally I would not think about doing it. But if I saw a company that I didn't like the look of, Lockheed Martin, for example, I may be wrong about this, I'm not sure. Hugo Manonti at some point had Lockheed Martin. I mean, I didn't actually eliminate it. I don't believe he has it anymore. That would be the only reason I would ever think about doing that.
One point I often make when I'm discussing with anyone the ethics of investing is that there are simply so many choices. There's almost unlimited choice as to what you can invest in.
Mm.
Why would you go anywhere near anything that even has a significant scope for debate about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with living. It's a very difficult choices to be made, right? But I think you would agree that there are some things we don't want to invest in. Would you agree with that?
Well, there's things I don't want to invest in and you don't want to invest in, but plenty of other people will do so quite happily.
Sure.
And it doesn't make us better people than them. I mean, maybe just a little bit, but...
I think it makes us feel happier and better about ourselves if we try to do that. The other thing is also the problem of things like greenwashing. You might be investing in something which you think is good, but isn't necessarily that good.
Sure, that's the problem with the whole ESG point scoring.
Mm.
You know, it's easy to dress something up.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the translation I work is involved with ESG and sustainability and things like that. Some of it is good and worthwhile. I mean, we're now talking about the energy transition and the just transition. But as you're right, it's very difficult to separate these things out. But in every day in our lives, we have to make ethical choices. Every time we sit down and eat a meal, we make an ethical choice. And I think to say, well, I mean, if I do it, then other people are not doing it, then I might as well do whatever I want. I mean, at some point, there's a cop-out, if you see what I mean. We're all individually responsible for whatever we do in life and whatever we do in terms of investment. This is what I believe.
Tell me something about copy trading that you only learned embarrassingly recently.
To be quite honest, yeah, I can't think about anything to answer that question. But having said that, I'm undoubtedly extremely ignorant about many aspects of copy trading.
Okay. Well, there are things that keep coming to light for me all the time as I dig around. The question of whether dividends are factored into monthly performance stats was something of a grey area. I'm pretty convinced now that they do factor in. But not long ago, I had a dividends PI on stating that he wished they were already shown in the monthly stats.
Yes.
It seems they are. Another question that came up very recently was whether the money that goes behind a copier of a copier is included in the PI's assets under copy, which is another thing I had never considered before. I don't believe it does ultimately, but it might have for all I knew. So it's still a brave new world. There's still plenty of things that we, as Donald Rumsfeld might say, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. We don't know what we don't know. So let's talk about your PIs that you haven't mentioned so far. Bees84, Stephen Louis Budgeon, Singapore-based. Did you see that I did a little video with him on the YouTube channel?
Yes, I did. I seem to remember one of the topics of discussion was kimchi.
That's correct.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Because I'm also interested in kimchi, so that's why I remember that one. Yeah, I did see that one, actually.
Do you make your own?
No, I should do. I tend to eat sauerkraut and miso. And also having kimchi in the fridge is antisocial if you share your living space with anybody else.
So you're a big fan of fermented foods?
Oh, yes. The gut microbiome is a very important thing to stay. Just if you want to live a long time, Gavin, I mean, keep going at the kimchi.
Kimchi and beans, I believe, are the best things for your microbiome. Plenty of beans.
Yes, I mean, tempeh is something very good because you have the beans and you also have the fermentation. And you can get that in Indonesia, right? Well, anywhere, but originally from Indonesia.
I have some in the fridge.
You do, yeah. You'll be living a long time as well, Gavin, okay?
Okay. Let's get back to Stephen Budgeon. Tell me about him. What do you like about him?
I think I probably came across him first listening to him on your podcast, okay? I'd seen his name because there was a group of people from Singapore. And one person who I very much liked his feed was Logic Fool, and he's also part of that group. I'm glad I didn't copy him because I think it was just after the March 2020 crash. He was shorting everything because he believed that everything was going to crash for a long time. And I became interested in that little group of people. Also, I'm very fond of Southeast Asia, where I've spent a lot of my life and continue to do so. Now that COVID is over, I'll be going back there very shortly, in fact. Also, he seemed to be somebody who definitely has a good financial background. He's very conscientious about communication. And also his diversification goes into different geographical areas. There's a lot of things in China and other parts of Asia. And also he has quite a lot of crypto. Part of me would like to have a PI who really goes all out with crypto. I do have one in mind if you want me to talk about her.
Okay.
Her name is Mimi Ho from Australia.
I thought you were going to say Mimi, yeah.
And I occasionally look at her portfolio and she seems to know what she's doing. I mean, obviously things are going badly at the moment. But then I would have this kind of wrenching in my gut about the mining. One of the reasons I chose Bees84 is because he has quite high crypto.
And what were your reasons for CPH Equities?
CPH Equities, he seemed to have a fairly good performance. I mean, he doesn't have too high risk. I mean, he's been going at it has a lot of financial experience. He's a chess grandmaster. He has all kinds of expertise. He appears in the financial press in Denmark. And he seemed like somebody to add. So I did. Another thing that affects my choice is the star color. So I presume that if somebody has a black star, then they've got to be pretty good in terms of the ranking, the pecking order or whatever. That doesn't mean I wouldn't go for other star colors under any circumstances, but that factors into my choice of PIs. Okay, whether it should or not, I'm not sure, but it does.
That's the wisdom of the crowd speaking, isn't it?
Yes.
And you don't strike me as someone who necessarily thinks that the crowd is always right.
No, you're definitely right about that. But this is my attitude when I first started copying, if you see what I mean. I thought, well, I'll go for people who have a good track record, have the black stars or whatever. But I'm thinking about revamping my collection of PIs in the fairly near future.
Do you mean when you started on eToro, you arrived, you thought, oh, I don't know anything. Everybody here is already at this party. They must know so much more than me. I can't go wrong to join this popular person.
No, one of the things was that I thought these people know more than I do. That's why I'm doing copy trading.
Yes, the PIs do, but do the other copiers? Because I think that's quite a natural response when you join a platform is
Yeah.
you consider yourself a newbie and that everybody else knows more than you.
Now I get your point. People have a black star because of the number of copies they have.
Correct.
Right, not because of their track record. Okay, so that was a basic mistake that I was making at the beginning. And in fact, you've enlightened me a bit more that in the future, but take somebody like Hugo Manonti. I mean, he doesn't have the long track record that some of the other PIs, but he got a black star very quickly. So
yes, I mean, the two things are connected. You have to do well to get a black star. But I don't think it's the be all and end all because there's a lot of, FOMOing in and I don't think the average copier really knows a great deal about what they're doing.
Yeah, including me.
So why listen to a room full of them shouting one person's name? You should really be deciding on a range of factors, not be swayed too much by the crowd, most of whom don't seem to know what a copy stop loss is. So. Do you allocate the same funds to each PI is a question I have here, and I can see from your invested column that you don't.
No, I don't, but I don't spend too much time thinking about it. The way I'll do it is I'll put in a certain amount of money with the idea that perhaps I can increase that percentage if I'm happy with the results, if you see what I mean. But I must admit that I don't put a great deal of thought into that. Probably the highest allocation I've got is probably for return invest, I would think. But there's not a huge difference.
He's 25%, Heloise 20, Hugo 17, B's approximately 17, CPH Equities 13, roughly speaking. Do you add funds on a regular basis, or what's the position there?
No, I don't add funds on a regular basis. I did for a few months, but not at the same time each month. I was just building up the funds, okay? In the last few months, I haven't been adding any funds. And there are things that are putting me off, which are there's probably some bad psychology going on there. My money is in euros, and the euro is almost at parity with the dollar. So I think, I use my card to pay eToro, but that probably means that I'm going to get $1 for €1, which obviously goes against the grain. But if everything is really down, and this is the time to invest in terms of opportunity, then I shouldn't be put off by that.
That's obviously the theory. But then lots of other things factor into it, as you've just said, exchange rate. Have you got the spare cash? Are you comfortable enough with eToro as a platform? Are there reasons for hesitancy there?
Well, only the hesitancy which I mentioned earlier in terms of solidity compared with a bank, but probably that's not a well-founded conviction, a concern, I think. So in the near future, I'm thinking of putting some more funds in, but with the idea of having a couple more PIs and gradually adding some more funds. But then if I decide to sell some of my mutual funds, then in that case, I would move them over to eToro. But also closing a PI when everybody's down, I feel reluctant to do that because I'll be closing at a loss. I mean, isn't that one of the cardinal sins, that cardinal rules, that you're not supposed to close anything at a loss?
Well, ideally not, but if you feel you could put the money somewhere where it's going to do better. But if you're not adding funds and you're not going to do anything in the next few months, then just sitting tight, as long as nothing has changed with your PIs, if you're still fundamentally happy with them.
Yes, I am. Maybe what I'm thinking about doing, we're talking about the period when the market starts to pick up a little bit. Then I would like to revamp things a little bit.
I know you have some views about the tone of copier comments on PI feeds. Let's talk about that.
Yes, this is probably because of my lack of experience with social media, but I just find it rather shocking that people are just handing out these insults left, right, and center. I mean, when you copy somebody, you can be courteous, and there doesn't seem to be very much moderation on eToro. Having said that, I don't spend very much time looking at the feeds, and one of the reasons I don't open them is because I don't want to read through. The other thing, a lot of it, you're kind of going through people who are asking, should they copy trade, copy open trades, how much, when should they add? And somebody says, my portfolio is down 17%. What are you going to do about it? I mean, no, I don't want to read things like that. But it's probably because of my naivety in terms of social media, which I have nothing to do with. It could be connected with that.
It's not. All the examples you give are incredibly either annoying or banal things to read.
And as such, I don't spend time doing that. But it bothers me. I mean, I was looking at Eloise's feed. She wrote a message, and there were people there with these comments, and they weren't even copying her. I mean, why would you be doing that?
Do you know many other people who copy trade or use eToro? Is it a big thing among your peers?
A big thing among my peers? No, among my peers, we spend a lot of time complaining about our ailments. I mean, we don't talk about copy trade. No, to be quite honest, I don't know anybody else who copy trades. There's one exception. I had an Italian friend who's a similar age to me, and I was talking about opening an account on eToro. This is a couple of years ago, and I never got round to it. And he did. He's not a very wealthy person, and I said, well, you put in 200 euros and see what you can do with it. I mean, even if you lose 200 euros, you've got nothing to lose. And he's a very intelligent person, and I thought maybe he can supplement his income a bit. And he played around with it, and at some point he gave up. He said, as far as I can see, it's basically down to winners and losers, and I'm one of the losers. He says, if somebody wins, then somebody else has to lose, and so he stopped doing it. So he really wasn't very interested. But it's certainly not the kind of thing which I would talk about with my peers.
What one feature would you really love to see on eToro?
I would like to see a better search function. That, for example, I could go in and I could say, I want to see all the PIs who specialize in dividends. Unless I'm missing something fundamental, I cannot do that right now. And so I could then look through this list and decide which person do I want. The kind of filters that I was using before were all based on financial and timeline parameters, and the results they came up with didn't say very much to me at the beginning. And the same would apply for any kind of PI, so that you could associate the PI with the kind of investment that they specialize in.
Yeah, all they have really is who invest in, and then there's market types, currencies, crypto, commodities, indices, that sort of thing. But what you're suggesting is that all PI profiles include a series of tags,
yeah,
indicating what they are. Are they ethical investors? Are they, well, for example, that was the one that you gave earlier. So you could have a number of tags so that they could then show up in those searches. So a bit more of an organic kind of search.
I like organic things. And that would enable somebody like me to kind of go through and find somebody to copy for a particular field of investment.
Based on their characteristics rather than just results or markets.
Yeah.
Okay, David, final question. I believe you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I say it anyway for the benefit of the listener?
Go ahead and say it, yeah.
For all those first-time listeners who've tuned in just because it's David Murphy gracing us with his presence. David, if there's one question you wished I had asked you during this chat but didn't, what would that question be?
Well, one thing you didn't do, Gavin, you didn't invite me to come back in 10 years' time and let you know how my portfolio is getting on. So let's hope you can do that.
Well, I think implicit in your answer is the suggestion that 10 years is a long time for a man of your years, but I'd say there's a far better chance, far higher probability of you still going strong than Copytraders Club.
Well, I certainly hope that Copytraders Club keeps going for that amount of time, right?
Well, patreon.com/Copytraders Club is the answer.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I don't want to close on a plug like that. We have to close on something different.
Right. I mean, then you would have, if you did invite me back, then you could have an octogenarian Copytrader. But there's one thing I would like to ask you, which you didn't actually ask, I don't think. You didn't ask me, how could we find out how many older people there are on eToro? Would there be such a way of doing that? I'm sure I'm not the only septuagenarian. I'm sure I'm not the only older Copytrader. There must be loads of others. How can we find that out?
I have no idea if that information would come from eToro. Maybe there are legions out there now who are tempted to write something in the comment section of the YouTube version of this conversation.
Right. And it'll all come out of the woodwork. Let's hope so.
You're leading the charge, David.
Right. Okay.
And thank you so much for coming to Copytraders Club. It's been very entertaining to hear all about eToro from your unique perspective.
Right. You're very welcome, Gavin. I very much enjoyed it.
All the best. See you back here when you're in your 80s.
Okay. I look forward to that. Bye-bye, Gavin.
David Murphy there, a surprisingly young dog learning new tricks. Amazing to think of the potential worldwide, pan-generational reach copy trading could have if eToro play their cards right. Everyone from 18-year-olds taking their first financial steps to seniors who have seen it all and still want a piece of the action. That's all from me. See you on Discord and Facebook. Until next time we meet at Copytraders Club, I wish you many happy returns. Obviously, anything you hear in this podcast is for entertainment only, not financial advice. Do your own research. It's just generic chit-chat. We don't know your individual circumstances, etc., and so forth.